As a child growing up in the 1980s, that was my first exposure to HIV. The awareness of it, and I think for the public, there was a lot of hysteria about it, and I remember getting a postcard at the house, America Responds to AIDS, and I remember the concerned look on my father's face when it came, because I was coming into puberty around that time, and it was a concern for everyone. As I went off to college, HIV testing was kind of talked about, and awareness and safe sex was very strongly promoted in the early 90s, and I was very aware of it. And but I think it really entered my life when I started chatting with a guy in a chat room in 1998, and I just started chatting him up. I liked his name, his username, and I asked him, hey, what's going on? And he blatantly told me pretty much in our first conversations that he was kind of down, and that his girlfriend had just broken up with him. And being nosy, I asked why, and he said, and it's literally one of the first things he told me about himself, because I'm HIV positive. Over time, I got to know him, and I found out that he had hemophilia, and that he got HIV and hepatitis C from his medicine. And it was kind of big to take in, but I was just kind of curious and being nice. Like, I want to know about these things because you learn about them from people who live it. So the more I got to know him and our friendship developed, I cared so deeply about him, I would cry myself to sleep at night after I got off the phone with him. And over time, this long-distance relationship developed into a romantic relationship. We've been married for 16 years, and it took me a long time to just come to terms with that and what that means, and what it meant for childbearing, what it meant for what I was taking on as someone who had 3 chronic illnesses. I found out a lot about myself, a whole lot about myself. I thought I was strong, and I did learn, yes, I am strong, but I also felt alone in dealing with it. It took me a couple of years in being in the hemophilia community before I even met another spouse, let alone someone else affected, because so many of those guys were gone, and some of the ones that we did know never married, hardly dated. So over time, I did meet other spouses, and things felt a little bit more normal. I could talk to people. I talked a lot with my mother-in-law. I didn't tell my parents that he had HIV for several months after they met him and got to know him a little bit. I didn't want that to taint their perspective of him. They loved him. They love him now. But I just wanted them to get to know him first before I disclosed that. And it really didn't affect anything. We just get through life. He takes his medicine every 3 months. I would go with him to his infectious disease doctor appointments, and he would do his blood work, and we would, it was always kind of that anxiety of waiting to find out, what's the CD4 count? Is the virus still undetectable? And I used to just sit there and cringe and wait. And thank goodness, in the last 16 years, he's only had a CD4 blip of 895. That's a viral load blip of 895, and his CD4 count has gone up. So he's managing that very well, and his other health is pretty much in check. So we primarily focus on hemophilia issues. But now as he's aging and he's been on the therapy for several years now, we're dealing with the autoimmune disease. We're dealing with a polyneuropathy, a weakness in his extremities, and it's really affecting our lives as far as what he can and can't do. And we're just having to be flexible and resourceful. But he's my best friend. Couldn't imagine life without him. And growing up with low vision as a child with a disability, I really think that also binds us together. We understand each other on a level, but I'm also his champion. We're each other's advocates, and he's learned so much. And he matured at a young age because of all he dealt with. So, and he suffered in silence. He didn't tell people that he had hemophilia because Ryan White had been in the news, and there was this assumption he lived in West Virginia. Fortunately, he lived in the town where the university was, so he didn't face that kind of ostracism, although it did get out at school. And I think he went to his 25th high school reunion last summer, and I think some of his classmates might have been a little shocked to see him, but there we were, the happily married couple living meaningful lives. We live now to help others going through difficulty. We founded a National Hemophilia Foundation chapter in West Virginia, and we are finding other families, other guys just like himself, who have been suffering in silence and isolation in Appalachia, and they touch our lives just as much as the mom with a child with hemophilia. For them, there's that added dimension, and we're so happy to have done that, and we really feel like this was our purpose, was to help other people. We feel like this is why we are united together, because we can offer comfort and advocacy. But I am HIV negative. I am tested regularly. I did have a scare last summer. I was assisting my husband with one of his intravenous infusions for his hemophilia medicine, and I got pricked by a needle. And it was straight to the ER, and it was frightening. It was very frightening. I went on PEP for a month, post-exposure prophylaxis, and I had some horrible side effects from the Truvada, but thankfully I was not infected, although I was exposed, and so grateful for that. But I do understand what that medicine feels like and how it can make you feel in the fear. He's more open about disclosing that now than he was in the past. I think a lot of the guys are stepping out of that shadow because they're not afraid anymore. They've lived this long. A lot of them were given death sentences, and they've lived. They've grown up with it, and they don't care. They're happy to be activists. They're happy to be out there and sharing their stories with the world, and I completely applaud them. And they're some of the most amazing guys I know, and I'm so lucky that I got to marry one. And I appreciate this project so much because it gives me a voice. It gives me a chance to share what it feels like to be in my shoes because of the thousands of hemophiliacs that were infected. There aren't many left, and some of them are married, some of them have kids, and we're hanging in there. We're doing our best. And it's important that our stories get out because this is a horrible tragedy. And people today, even hemophiliacs today, the young ones, they don't understand what it was like to live during those times in the 80s and 90s and the stigma. They don't understand the added layer of illness that they don't live with, and that's a good thing that they don't have to live with it, but these stories will help them understand the suffering that came before them. And I tell people all the time that the nation's blood supply is safer because of efforts of people with HIV. It cleaned up the blood supply of all diseases for everybody, and that's another important legacy for the suffering that was wrought. Thank you.